So thank you everybody for coming this morning. And I'd like to introduce briefly Marc Lesser, who many of you know already, and he is a teacher at San Francisco Zen Center and has spent many years at a Zen Center, and also maybe you can clarify for me exactly what you were doing at Google, Marc, but counseling and holding classes for executives on mindful leadership and many other companies as well. And we're very grateful to have you today. Share your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Brenda.
I was actually in one of those classes that Marc taught along with Norman Fisher at Google, and it was wonderful.
Oh, you were in one of those Search Inside Yourself classes? Yeah. Interesting. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Well, I was, I think, a little earlier on this call, Brenda was saying, that my talk was going to be about, technology and leadership and practice, and I realize I have this basic underlying assumption that I'm happy to be challenged about, but my basic assumption is that everything we do is practice, and that it's sort of, it always seems to me, I get it, and it's also a bit of an odd idea, this question about how can we bring practice into our work, or how can we bring practice into technology. I'm more like, how couldn't we? How is it, how like, as though when we go to work, or as though when we relate to technology, we're somehow something different than we are when we're sitting in the Zendo or whatever else we're doing. I know Les and I both were early ventures into writing about this topic of work and practice, and my first book was called ZBA, Zen of Business Administration, which actually was kind of started out as a joke. I was once having dinner with a group of people at Green's restaurant in San Francisco, and the person who knew me was introducing me to someone that I hadn't met before, and he said that I had my ZBA degree, and I'd never thought of such language, and in fact I was relatively new out of getting an MBA degree, and after having spent 10 years as a resident at the San Francisco Zen Center. But the first chapter in that book, ZBA, is entitled "We're all Zen students and we're all business people." And to me, we're all Zen students is kind of obvious, because we all are born and we all die, and we all have to deal with this, that we somehow find ourselves in these human bodies, emerged into this world, not knowing where we came from or where we're going, and knowing that in some very primal way, the mystery of this consciousness and of being a human being. And we're all business people, in that at the same time, we have to contend with living an ordinary life of paying the bills and dealing with other people, and figuring out what kind of work to do, what kind of problems we're going to solve. And yeah, so I think to me, that's a basic starting point for me when I think about this question of work and practice, or technology in practice. I remember several years ago, I led an all-day meditation retreat. And I think this was like a 5 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. day-long retreat with about a dozen Google engineers who I was working with, and at the end of the day, I could see that none of them had ever done anything like this. They had I don't think any of them had ever sat meditation for maybe more than 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but they spent all day long, and most of them were completely blown away by this experience of sitting with such kind of safety and concentration, and during the discussion that we had a short discussion at the end of the day, and they said, we had no idea this was what meditation is. Do we need to leave our jobs as Google engineers, and do we need to go to Tassajara Zen, because we had often talked about Tassajara and monastic living, and my response to that was, I wouldn't stop you, of course. That would be, I think there's something terrific about monastic experience, but make your life into a monastery right now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to leave Google. You don't have to leave being an engineer, and that could look like having some space every morning where you can step out of your regular life and practice zazen, practice meditation. And that could look like bringing practice, letting go of any distinction of there being any difference between practicing and living, practicing and working, practicing and being an engineer, or whatever you're doing. And I think of I've been I often take the liberty of I kind of quote teachers, but kind of change the quotes a little bit to make them suit my own purposes. So there's a quote it's based on something that Shunryu Suzuki says in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, but I've kind of put my own spin on it. But basically he says, the purpose of our lives is to cross the shore from confusion, delusion, to awakening, to freedom and clarity. This is the purpose of our lives. And I think it's worthy coming back to, well, what is the purpose of our lives? And he states it with such clarity. But then the next sentence is one where, in his own way, is surprising. He says, and the secret is to realize that we cross this shore with every step we take. The secret is that we cross this shore with every step that we take. So I think I think in some way he is saying a lot of where I started with, that our lives, everything we do is practice, and we also need to work at it, right? Again, it's some of you may be familiar with, this was the burning question that Dogen had, the founder of Soto Zen in Japan in the 13th century. His burning question was if we're all enlightened, if we're all awakened beings, then why do we need to practice? Why do we need to practice? And I think, we need to practice because we need to fulfill this purpose. There's some purpose of crossing the shore from confusion to awakening to clarity. And then the secret, the how do we do that is to make everything that we do practice. Make everything that we do practice. And it's more than, I think it's more than an idea. It somehow is, this is what I so appreciate about Zen practice and meditation practice, is that it's a body practice. It's an embodiment practice. It's, you know, it's not just changing our thinking. It's not just like, oh yeah, I do that. Oh, that sounds easy. Well, it's easy and it's not easy. It's not easy. That we so quickly, we so quickly revert to reacting to small-mindedness, to anger, to self-protection, to fear, all of these, to dissatisfaction, to distraction, that that the work of coming back again and again to actually living this as a more awake person. I've also been quoting the very first few words in the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind are, if we think that when we die, this is the end of our lives, this is wrong understanding. And if we think that when we die, this isn't the end of our lives, this is also wrong understanding. So it's interesting, again and again, we're confronted with this apparent contradiction, this apparent paradox of the gap between, right, the purpose of our lives and fulfilling this purpose, and then this, and there's nothing that we need to do. We're already there. So we're there and we're not there. Our life ends with when we die, and it doesn't end when we die. How do we find our how can we find our way in this this path? What is this path? And to me, the one word answer to that question of how do we find our way is practice, right? That we keep having to come back to practicing on the cushion and off the cushion. And I think there's many different teachings and expressions in Zen and in Buddhism, and one that I've been appreciating lately is, start with the preliminaries. Start with the preliminaries, and I've been more and more, both in my own teaching of meditation and in practicing meditation, I've been emphasizing what I think of as preliminaries of Zazen practice, which I'll share with you. And I'm curious as to what you all think of this. But I think the preliminaries of Zazen practice are that we are consciously embodying what it feels like in the body to be safe. Embodying what it feels like in the body to be safe. Radically safe, that we notice, and that part of to feel safe is we notice our habit of scanning for threats, right? We've evolved, and we could talk a lot more about this, but as part of our evolution is that we've evolved to scan for threats, because evolution only cares about one thing, which is that we stay alive and that we pass on our genes. And scanning for threats is a really good habit to have. Scanning for threats, though, is more than just external threats. I think it's also internal threats. This voice, this internal voice of judgment. How do I look? Am I okay? How do other people think about me? All those, that scanning, that internal scanning for threats, noticing that as well and letting that go. Yeah. So embodying, what does it feel like? What does it feel like in the body to be safe? I think is the first part of Zazen. The second practice is, what does it feel like to be satisfied? Real in the body. What does it feel like in the body to not need anything, to be okay? And to not even okay beyond okay. Like just like no gap. I'm like just completely appreciating whatever comes up, even if it's distraction, grief, anger, love, joy, satisfied, nothing missing, What does it feel like in the body to not need anything, nothing lacking? And the third preliminary is, what does it feel like in the body to be fully connected? Connected, no separation with myself and with others and with the world. That it's ludicrous, any idea that I'm anything but a, you know, part of this vast natural web of being, and that all humans and all life and all non-life, it's all connectedness, a radical connectedness. So I think I think of these as body practices, that with every breath, we're embodying safety, satisfaction, and connection. And then, of course, I said these are the preliminaries. Then we're ready to just let go of everything, and have the courage to step off, and see what happens. See what happens when we have this kind of radical sense of our own appreciation, sincerity, kindness, compassion, to allow to see that that's, that when we step away even from all of these preliminary practices, that we are held and held by things that we can't even name. Yeah, so I think so I there's many things we could talk about how, okay, so what does this have to do with being a leader? What does this have to do with being a technologist? Well, I hope everything. I hope that, there's many things about communication skills, envisioning, resilience, how we skillfully build teams. But to me, all of that are strategies that grow out of the ground of practice, of embodying safety, satisfaction, and connection, and embodying that we're all Zen students, we're all business people, embodying that the purpose of our lives is to cross the shore, and really embodying that, and that we do that, we cross that shore with every step we take, embodying that again and again, not only on the cushion, but in meetings, in difficult conversations, in conflicts with our business partners, that that is all there in all of those activities. And I think I want to end with a poem, which I think expresses these ideas really well. And this is a poem by the, interesting that this is a Persian poet who I believe was alive at the same time that Dogen was, or close to when Dogen was, 13th century, different part of the world in Persia. And this poem is called Tripping Over Joy by Hafez, as translated by Daniel Ladinsky. And he says, what is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? Right? What is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that God has just made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, I surrender. Whereas, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. Right? The saint is tripping over joy and saying, I surrender. Whereas you, my dear, still think you have 1,000 serious moves. So I think my take about that poem is that we do have 1,000 serious moves, and we need to be serious and take our moves seriously and play serious, and at the same time surrender to, it's all practice. Everything we do is practice. There's no getting away from it. And anytime we think we're not practicing, we should burst out in laughter at our own stupidity. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I think so here's what I want to do. I would like to suggest that we get into groups of 3. Seeing how the math works out, there may be a couple groups of 4.
Sure.
I'm happy to be, you can, I'm happy to be in a group. So what I want to suggest is that we do monologues. So each person maybe will have a whole 3 minutes to talk. It's a very short time, but let's try it. 3 minutes. And during that 3 minutes, the other people will just listen, no interrupting. If you run out of something to say, we're good. We should be good at sitting quietly, but take the whole 3 minutes. And then we'll have maybe another 3 minutes for just talking amongst ourselves. So we'll do this for a total of, like 12, 13 minutes. And the suggestion for the person speaking is, what say you about this this topic of that everything we do is practice? How's that going for you? How do you? Yeah, just whatever. How does that strike you? Where do you feel maybe some resistance or gaps to that, or where do you feel inspired by that? That's a suggested topic. Responding to this topic of everything that we do is practice. The other possible topic is anything you want to talk about. It's your 3 minutes. This will probably never in this lifetime or any other lifetime happen again, that you'll have 3 minutes with these two people to listen to you. So use the time well is my suggestion. And the spirit of this is that that even this is practice. Even these groups we're practicing showing up. We're practicing, and it's okay to be awkward. Imagine saying something that surprises yourself, that you haven't shared before. These will be confidential, I hope, so you know that people won't repeat anything that you say, so that you can be as heartfelt and real as you feel comfortable being. And we're practicing listening here as well. Okay. So if we can, Bonnie, you're going to get us into groups.
Yes, I'm ready to beam you up. So what time do we come back?
Let's come back. So let's say that it's 9:30. Let's come back at 9:43.
Perfect. All right. All right, you are all going to get an invite to your room. And you should receive an invitation to join your room, and you click join.
Well, looks like we are all back safely, and we have time. I'd be curious what happened in your group. Anything there happened that you'd like to talk about, or any comments or questions to anything I brought up. And you can we're a small enough group that you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand, or you could also use your electronic hand if that's easier. I just want to open it up.
Mark, I had a question about your notion of preliminaries. I wanted to see if you thought it resonated with something else that I was reading just recently, which basically said right effort arises not from the force of your will, but when the conditions have been established which lead to its arising. And that sort of sounds to me very similar to what you're saying about the preliminaries.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's our language is so dualistic, that as soon as we say effort, there's effortlessness, or with will feels like a little effortful. And what you're saying, I think, is a little bit like, less willful, or it's like, there's a beautiful line in Dogen's essay. See, Dogen figured this all out in the 13th century, where there's a line in the Genjo Koan where he says something like, the self going out toward all things is delusion. Allowing all things to come to the self is awakening. And I think maybe I'm paraphrasing a bit what I hear you saying, or I'm through Dogen, and in some way, it's a little bit. One way that I think about it is that it takes some will, it takes some motivation, it takes some effort to get ourselves to sit on the cushion. Right? There's it just does. But once we sit on the cushion, though, then it's a different kind of effort. Then it's really the effort to let go of any effort. Then it's really like, forget it, whatever brought you there, again, it's to me, it's a lot like the Suzuki Roshi quote. So it's the purpose of our lives is to cross the shore. That thought might lead me to sit on my cushion. But then when I sit on my cushion, with every breath, I'm awake. With every breath, I'm awake. I'm forgetting about this crossing shore business. So, that's a little bit how I think about it. Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah, it does. It kind of reminds me of there's a funny little anecdote in, I think it's The Shine and Light in One Corner of the World, where a student asks Suzuki Roshi, if we aren't allowed any gaining ideas, then why do we ever come to practice in the first place?
Yeah.
And he says, well, you're actually allowed one gaining idea. And the student says, well, oh, tell me, what is that? And Suzuki Roshi says, no, that's a secret. It always seems like maybe by beginner's mind, we don't mean at the very, very beginning when we had a gaining idea coming to practice. It's once we get into practice, then, as you say, that effort of will sort of fades away and practice becomes effortless.
Yeah. 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 But I think then, the effortlessness, I'd say, has the flavor of selflessness, and it also has the maybe shadow side of passivity. So it's being aware of the shadow sides and trying and doing our best to emphasize the allowing the selflessness, that edge of, in my small group, the Dennis brought up the question around it's similar around safety, that safety feels so safe, and is that really where we want to be? Well, it's like, well, we want to be safe enough to be on our edge, our learning edge, our growing edge. It never quite feels, again, it's a language thing. It's safe enough, right? So again, similarly, I think the shadow side of safety is a kind of passivity, but the leading edge of safety, allows me to go walk in the dark despite my fear of the dark, right? Or allows me to see what it's like to stop counting. What happens when I stop counting my exhales and I let go? I let go of counting my exhales. What happens then? Who am I? Who am I when I stop counting? Or who am I when I let go of the ideas of safety and not safe?
Mark, this brings to mind the ideas in child development of attachment, and kind of the baby attaching to the mother and so forth. And, many times people, and it's in order to form a secure attachment, the mother has to be there, provide that safe environment for the baby. And that actually creates a situation where the baby feels great exploring the world and leaving the mother ultimately. But that initial period of attachment is very necessary. And if you try to actually force it apart and say, you need to be independent, actually creates dependence, a weird kind of a paradoxical situation.
Yeah. So it's interesting, the parallels between raising infants and sitting zazen. I think it's, we're, and I think it's good that when we sit on the cushion, we treat ourselves like infants, in that sense of, right, seeing our own attachment to the safety of, in this case, it's not the our mother, it's our own idea that we have of who we are, our own, so we need, we need a, we should have a, I'm part of the paradox of this practice is that I think we need to have a healthy ego. We need to have a healthy idea of self, and having confidence, having a healthy sense of who we are. Again, maybe as a leader, as whatever we're doing in the work world, whatever we're doing in the world is really, really important. And to really be a good leader, or to really be in relationship with other people, there's a need to feel safe enough to loosen that sense of our own self, to really to be super curious about who are these other people, and it takes, I think, a little loosening of our own views about that we have to feel safe enough to to be curious. And as I say that, I recognize that the times where I've gotten into trouble as a leader is when I thought I was doing that, but it kind of became more and more apparent that no, I'm kind of attached here to my own view. My own views here are they're in my body. They're hard to see. They are influencing how I'm showing up here, and I've got some more work to do to be even more clear and more curious about what's happening here. It's humbling, this human condition. And I love, and it was a big aha. I was I don't know, in my late 20s when I was asked to be the Tenzo, the head cook in the Tassar kitchen. And I was excited about this idea. And I discovered very quickly how hard leadership was. I discovered that I was not very good at making requests of people or setting boundaries, and that it was kind of a mess. And I thought I could learn a lot if I keep. This is a good place to keep putting myself into as a learning place. So Robert, you have your hand up.
Yes.
I'm hearing background noise. I don't know if we should maybe mute. You should mute yourself if you're not speaking. And Teresa, I
Yeah,
see your hand is up.
Yeah, and I
Rob?
was going to tell Brenda. Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah. So Robert, and then Teresa.
Yes, you mentioned just a few moments ago about being in our body. I wonder how often I have everything in my mind, not my body. I wish I could get out of my mind. How do I do that?
I think this is where the body is a really good teacher. That, to in meditation practice, to emphasize body scan. I mean, very literally, to what's happening with my toes? What's happening with, to really keep coming back to the body. And when I say the body, I would include feelings and emotions in that, but I'd say starting with sensation, literally bodily sensations, and to practice with that in meditation, outside of meditation. Like right now, I'm like, okay, what's happening with my shoulders? How do my hands feel? How do my arms? How am I sitting here in this body? What am I feeling? What am I feeling right now? And yeah, so body and feelings and emotions, to keep emphasizing that and come back to that as much as possible. And two fabulous books that I recommend reading on this topic. One is called The Body Keeps the Score. It's a really good book. It emphasizes trauma, but actually it gives lots and lots of really good practices about the body. And the other is a more recent book called My Grandmother's Hands, which is a book about racism and how racism lives in the body. But more and more, I'm kind of getting how, especially for we white people living today, I think becoming aware of racism and the body is a real powerful door for practice. There are many, many powerful doors for practice, but I think that's an important one, not just for practice, but for everyone, that yeah, I don't mean to belittle it by saying it's good for your practice. It is good for your practice, but it's also good for people of color and for other white people to practice with this deep, deep embodied racism that we white people have in our bodies. Thank you for the question. Teresa.
Thank you for your presentation, Mark, and Brenda for organizing. And after me, Travis, who is on the phone, he has a question. I don't think he can raise his hand on the phone. So I wanted to ask you if you could please describe what is it for you to feel safe? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, you know, I'm very much exploring and playing with these ideas myself. You know, my first answer that came up was I don't really know, but I'll try and do better than that, which is that many different levels to it. It's many levels, but the most obvious level for me is to notice when I'm protecting myself, to notice when I'm and many things, right? So it's like you know, I do quite a bit of coaching and working with executives and working in the business world, and I find myself coaching people around their own inner critic and around their, you know, judging themselves. And so these, to me, these are forms of feeling unsafe, that kind of inner critic, that inner voice. And that, so for me, when those inner voices, those inner critics come up for me, I like, oh, I'm doing that. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I'm doing exactly what I'm often advising other people not to do. Or so it's interesting. I'm recently I'm feeling, and I'll give you an example. I'm feeling safe enough right now to think that I could reach out and find an agent who might represent me for my next book. And I thought, I wonder why I haven't really done that in the past. Maybe because I'm afraid that I'll get turned down. I'm afraid I won't be able to find anyone or whatever. So I've started reaching out to agents, and of course now I'm getting rejections. And it's like, ouch. Oh, that hurts. And so what? So what? Like, and then recently, I got a response from an agent said, "Oh, let's talk. I like your work." It's like, "Oh, great." But in a way, it's like, that's just like, it's just interesting to see my own, you know, or it used to be, I can remember, when I was running my last company, you know, one thing happening that felt positive would make me feel good the whole day, and one negative thing would have me feel bad, for days. And so it's like, to me, the practice is like somehow seeing that, it's all a version, I think, of our habit of scanning for threats, looking for what's threatening this self and what is saying this self is okay. And again, so noticing that and saying, "Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how uh, I'm scanning for threats there, or I'm scanning for something from the outside saying that I'm okay." Um, and again and again, I think on the cushion, it's like, what does it feel like in the body to be safe? What does it feel like to not need to not, um, you know, again, a beautiful line from Dogen's Genjo Koan. Um, uh, Weeds grow even though we avoid them, and flowers fall even though we like them. And so he's teaching, I think, this radical practice of acceptance and safety, knowing that, um, you know, we can't control anything. We will die. Everyone around us will die. We will lose everything. And yet, how can we practice? How can we feel safe, accepting, appreciative, even when, weeds grow and flowers fall? Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick comment, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
There is this line in the Song of the Grass Hat by Sekito Kisen that I really like. It says, let go of hundreds of years and relax completely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
Sometimes you read some lines and they are therapeutic. They're like a balm. So I wonder if safety is a little bit like that. To
Definitely.
let go.
Yeah. There's so many. I love that line. I know that poem. It's a beautiful poem, and that line also. And it's funny how there's a gentleness to that line. To me, it's interesting. Zen. To me, Zen is this whole conglomeration of, Confucianism and ethics and Taoism and nature and Indian spirituality and humor. To me, that line, it has a very Taoist quality to it, of it's beautiful kind of, oneness with everything and acceptance and time. To me, the Zen version of that line is what's, I think of it as the vow of repentance. That is, it's interesting these days. It's now chanted every morning at the San Francisco Zen Center, at the beginning of morning service. I don't know, and I'm not familiar with the Kannon Do service, so maybe it's chanted there as well. But it's the, all my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. And I think it's that similar message, but with a different tone, a little bit more sense of, yeah, now that I have recognized all of my ancient twisted karma, it's a sense of shining the light. I've now shined the light on everything. I'm safe. I'm safe enough that I can move forward now that I've repented for anything I've caused and anything I haven't caused.
Thank you. I think
Could you-
Travis.
Could you read that line?
Travis.
Teresa, could you say that line again from the poem?
Oh, let go of hundreds of years and relax completely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Hi, Mark, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, yes.
Oh, great, thanks. I really like this this topic of what I would call humanism that's baked into Buddhism. Of course, that's kind of a rational look at it, but can you say more about that? I mean, the naturalness of it and some of the survival and normal ego aspects of, you know, confidence and being able to maneuver in society. And is that the Bodhisattva path?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, what I love about the Zen school in particular is that it refuses to be identified with any, you know, again, I noticed when you, you know, when you said humanism, I kind of wanted to take it in a completely other direction immediately, you know, to that, yeah, I was describing to someone.
It's more scientific, right?
Well, again, it's more scientific and it's less scientific. It's more nature-based and it's more cutting through.
Less social.
Somehow cutting through any particular identity that we want to give it, and
Right, like pure experience, right?
I was describing to someone the other day, when I first lived at Tassajara, we used to actively carry the kiyosaku, the stick that was used for waking people up. And I know when I talk about that now, it seems like so like, what? You know, it seems like barbaric or crazy that we'd walk around and if someone was sleeping, you would hit them. But
right.
The
importance of effort.
But I got to the point where I became one of those stick carriers, and I and I still sometimes refer back to that energy of what it was like carrying that stick, and that my job was to be completely non-judgmental and to just have the attitude and aspiration to help people by waking them up, by hitting them with as much crispness and love as I possibly can. So when you asked that question, I wanted to hit you with the stick. I noticed that's where that in like, you know, don't try and, I mean, I say this lovingly, really, that it was like, don't try to corner the teaching as humanism or anything else.
Yeah.
And I, at the same time, I'm agreeing with you that yes, this is, you know, my particular bias and I'm fine with being accused of being biased. I think there's no avoiding bias.
Yeah.
My
And
bias
my,
is practicing in the world.
yeah. And my perspective is more, we tend to just always be narrowing the definition of humanism, and that if you can couple that with this sort of non-dual natural humanism, you pretty much, if someone was not going to know anything about Zen, if you ask, like, what do you do? I mean, I can't imagine two terms that coupled just describe the bodhisattva path and why we have that right effort, you know.
Yeah.
I spent 2 years at a service academy with very harsh conditions, and I know that feeling of the stick, you know.
Mhm.
And what that does to somebody, and the kind of righteous effort, you know, of disciplining yourself first, really,
Mhm.
and then you move from that spot. You know, I really I find that Buddhism is needed in this world, and I'm interested in ways to practice and you know, fully integrated into, you know, a type of cultural life that's sane and allows for the future of the human race to coexist, you know, with
Yeah.
the world that we know is finite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think, you know, you mentioned the bodhisattva way, or again, to me, it's the human way. It's the human way. And, you know, beings are numberless. I vow to save them. And delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. And so sometimes when, you know, people would say, you know, why am I teaching meditation at Google? And there are many motivations, but one response of mine was, well, there's a lot of suffering of people there. Why are you counting them out? And it's, I think, my experience is it's actually been a really I don't know, wonderful, effective way of reaching out to people who would not have ever, for whatever reason, might not have come into the door of practice, and were introduced to practice in their workplace. Umar, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I had my hand up. So one of the things that I was going to say about agents and work was that when I was in film school, one of the things that used to happen that we'd be working on projects, and my friend was an actress, and she was going around getting work, and she would say to me constantly, so I said to her, so how's it going? She's like, I keep getting rejected. And I said to her, and I said, well, my coach, my acting teacher told me, you know, this is just normal. Yeah. 12 people will reject you, 13th person will accept you. So don't worry about it, just keep going. And then, you know, my directing teacher would always say to me, I would say, oh, this didn't go really well. He said, don't worry about that, just, you know, focus on the next one. So it was always like, keep moving forward no matter what happens, keep moving forward no matter what happens. So I just wanted to share that, so from my experience. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you, two things I wanted to say. One was that I wanted to ask you, these things that come up inside of us, like doubt, and if somebody is going to validate us, or unsurety, unsafety, and all this stuff that, you know. And to me, what came across from all of this, and lately I've read a book called Wash the Dishes, because on the back of the book, if you look at it, it says actually that this is directly a quote from the book, that when you wash the dishes will tell you exactly the state of your mind. And what mind you're in. And I was thinking, yeah, this is true. And what came to me was that there is an attachment that goes beyond these doubts. There is an attachment that goes beyond uh, the need for attention and validation, and if I am good enough or if I'm loved enough. It is this. There's this question that says, "Why am I attached to asking all these questions?"
Yeah, there's something about this edge of, right? Again, it's a little bit like the, Dogen's studying the self and going beyond the self,
Mm.
studying the self and going beyond the self. And yeah, I mean, I just feel that in whatever, at the moment, I'd say I feel it most profoundly, perhaps. Well, I feel it a lot. I feel it a lot in my coaching practice, right? Or and anyone who's, that noticing whatever my own filters are, and at the same time trying to let go of my filters and really listen to who's this other person who's sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
I also notice it a lot. I find that in my writing, it's like how do I get out of my own way? Like there's nothing as debilitating as trying to write book worthy writing. It's like just let it go and just feel. Let me just write crap, and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So this again, it's that funny edge,
Mm-hmm.
or even it's one of the things I love about I'm many people don't realize that I'm a sports addict. I love watching almost every sport. I mean, I'm not too embarrassed to admit I even like golf and bowling,
Same here. Yeah.
but what came up for me was like, so like Steph Curry practices and practices and practices ridiculous number of hours, but then when he's out in the game, there's a freedom, there's a it's just amazing to see the ball come into his hands, and clearly there can't be any time for conscious thought, the release, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow, like just watching. I find it just invigorating watching that kind of selflessness, but behind it is so much practice, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's, to me, that's the it's a beautiful edge. Again, whether it's whatever, whether in leadership, in technology, in sports, in anything, in
Mm-hmm.
having. I feel that way in the I love being I love being with groups of people when I can let go of caring how I'm showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but thank you for that.
Sure.
The other, Anna.
These three preliminaries of practice really resonated with me, especially on the cushion, I think, to be safe, to be satisfied, to be connected. And I think it's true as we practice with each other too, but I wondered if there were other preliminaries you could think of that especially show up as we work with other people and as we work at work that you think are showing up.
Oh, in some way, I think of, I think these three are incredibly broad. That they each one, maybe for any one of these can have 5 or 10 sub practices. Yeah, I mean, so this practice of safety, noticing when we scan for threats externally, noticing our own inner critic, noticing, I'd say all blame and judgment come, the whole host of feelings and tendencies to notice under that, under satisfaction, all kinds of wanting more of anything. It's been fascinating for me. I've been experimenting with I've been experimenting with fasting, and it's been super interesting just noticing the difference about the habit of wanting to eat versus being hungry. And or the habit of wanting a certain kind of success, or so there's what am I doing that's extra? What do I really need? What's needed? All of these sort of subcategories of satisfaction, and then lifetime of practices under the practice of connection, noticing what are our in-groups and out-groups, and how there's no avoiding, it's in our, that one's like in-groups and out-groups. And I went to a, when was it? It must have been sometime last year. Shohaku Okamura did a 5-day retreat on a Dogen fascicle called Inanimate Objects Express the Dharma. And pretty quickly he had me convinced that what this distinction between inanimate and animate is maybe not as distinct as we tend to think. That part of what can we learn from the trees and the stones, and the stars, and anyhow. So I think within any of these, and maybe I'm just being lazy that I can't think of anything outside of these three, because they feel so broad, but I think there's so many within those three that you could unpack and name. It probably wouldn't be a lot to come up with 5 or 10 sub practices under each of these three. They're pretty big buckets of human behavior.
Yeah, I think that's true. Thank you.
Thanks. And maybe as the last question, May.
Thank you, Mark. I love your stick. I feel like I'm especially in this technology, the brain has been really hardly trained. I just constantly feel like I need a stick. And then maybe this question deserves another stick, but I just keep rising up, and then I feel like I have to take care of this impulse. You mentioned that we're in this cross the other shore business. And then of course I know that you constantly interact with the people in business. But we also know that there's no other shore, right? And then when we breathe, I feel like when we breathe, we inhale and we go to another shore, and when we exhale, we're coming back. We constantly go and coming back, constantly go and coming back. I'm just curious that what if I, maybe because of the setting of business, I was not able to carry this conversation because it sounds so confusing, right? Maybe I think we can talk about here. I think everyone knows, but in the business setting, we still have to say, hey, there's another shore, right? There's a such that we can make other people understand us. I think that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in the business world, or in any world where people are doing things together. So I think it's the same thing in the education world, or the nonprofit world, or the political world. It's people doing things together. a term that I've been using a lot lately is wanting to create cultures, wanting to work together in ways that emphasize compassion and accountability. And so compassion, is the loving and caring about people. And accountability is getting stuff done, and getting stuff done, agreements, clear communication. These are all, both of these, I think, are hugely important and worthwhile to work toward, to constant awareness and improvement about being more caring, more trusting, and holding ourselves and each other to be accountable. Performance matters. What you say matters. What you do matters. And in some way, speaking the truth is a form of compassion. And and being caring and loving is a form of accountability. So I think, and if the word compassion is too soft in your business place, you can replace it with building inner strength. Inner strength is a good synonym, I think, for compassion, or just caring. It's funny, I think caring is the most undervalued asset in people working together and organizations. It's hard to care when there's money involved and politics involved and fear involved, but to lead with caring, I think, is something that can work in the business, in any business setting. I hope that helps. Well, I've totally enjoyed this time together. I hope you have too.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Les.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for staying out so many interesting, wonderful questions. And
thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Brenda, for making this happen.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you for crossing the streams for this Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the waterfall.
Hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.